The New York Jets get snubbed by Duce Staley, running backs coach who they were hoping would be theirs. Staley opts for the Browns over the Jets. Jamal Adams, this has been going on for a couple weeks now, folks, flirting with the Jets on social media, uh, liking a handful of posts, one specifically that I saw a couple weeks ago that mentioned the possibility of his return to the Jets. And that and some more tonight with myself and Dylan Terraman. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio, jetnation.com. Be sure to log into jetnation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. As I said, myself and Dylan, Chris Schubert may or may not be joining us. He is that is to be determined. We will see. Dylan, how we doing tonight?
Doing well. I mean, this is our last show from our home area. I know my backdrop looks a little different, but yeah, last show before Mobile, before we'll probably be doing content side by side. And I'm just super excited to get into it.
Yeah. Mobile's going to be an exciting time. I've been watching tons of prospects over the past couple of weeks, and we'll spend the next several days. I'm planning on downloading enough stuff to be able to watch. On my flight, I have an 8-hour flight. Getting to Mobile a day and a half before practices start, so that'll be some more time for that. Because there's still a few guys I haven't had the opportunity to watch. Some of the small school guys and there will be guys that I won't find anything on before I get there because you get these really small school obscure guys that you might find a highlight reel, but you'd like to get to see more than that. Let's kick things off though, Dylan. Something, and this could be a recurring theme, right? So Duce Staley, former NFL running back coach, was rumored to be meeting with the Jets earlier this week or about a week ago. There was no known opening at the time, but since then, Taylor Embry has moved on, so the Jets are looking for someone to fill that post. Duce Staley snubs the Jets, says, no thanks, I'm going to Cleveland, I'm going to work with the Browns. And when you have a coaching staff that's on life support and could be on their way out, I talked about this yesterday, coaches don't get a lot of stability. And if they can get a little bit of it, they'll take it over not having it. And the Browns situation right now is more stable than the Jets because if the Jets flop next year, and if Aaron Rodgers can't manage to stay on the field again, there's a good chance everyone is fired. So attracting coaches is going to be tough. Not that the Jets are looking for coaches, because unlike a lot of playoff teams, the Jets kept everybody around, bring the band back together. So failure there on Robert Saleh's part. And then Saleh reportedly meets with Staley. Staley says, thanks, Rob, but no thanks. I'm going to go to Cleveland. Where the Jets go from here remains to be seen. Look, I'm not up in arms over who the running backs coach is going to be. It's not that it's not an important job, but the Jets have much bigger fish to fry than that. But this could be a thing with players too, right? If Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are standing there giving their free agent pitch to a guy they want to bring in, and let's say they're making a competitive offer, they're not way overpaying, the player's going to take into account how much does it mean? Like what these guys are saying right now, how much is it going to mean this time next year when they could all be fired and I'll be playing for another coach that I don't know? So could hurt in free agency. We've already seen it hurt in coaching. What are your thoughts on the whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, just to touch more on all the parts, I'll go a little bit backwards. But yeah, you have to start thinking about this not just from a coaching perspective, but what players are going to do this when March 15th, March 16th rolls around and the free agency market opens and they see a team that, yes, has a lot of talent on paper and some of the coaches that players want to play for. And I know Salah is included in that, but you look at the totality of the situation and the organization, and like you said, they're on life support. You're not going to necessarily want somebody who the GM could be fired, the head coach could be fired, you could be looking for another job next year. You don't want to enter a situation knowing that this could be a one and done situation. Comparatively, you look at the Browns, they had 11 wins, they made it to the playoffs. Their coach is, successful and going to be around for a while. So if he makes it work in Cleveland, which also the better job, you have Nick Chubb, you have, I believe they're still going to retain Kareem Hunt, not sure there, but it looks like a better situation on paper, whereas we just have Brees Hall and hopefully Izzy Abanikanda. So I don't blame Duce Staley for picking the Browns. I also don't fault the Jets for, losing out on Duce Staley. I think we were always the long shot team to get him just because of our organization's, picture right now. So that was always going to be hard for us. But yeah, it does hurt to see the report that he does sign with hired by Cleveland, not with us. We're still looking for a guy. I think the Tennessee RB or tight ends coach who worked with Keith Carter. And like you said, running backs coach isn't the most important offensive, assistant position. I'd say offensive line is even more important to your running backs. And Keith Carter's not a good offensive line coach. So
I was going to
it's,
say, don't worry. They have an offensive line coach there.
yeah,
He's not going anywhere. He's safe.
yeah, exactly. But I also think that that's more important to your running back room than the running back coach itself. And we saw that with Taylor Embry. I don't necessarily think he was a net positive to the organization. I feel like he was just kind of there. Like he reminds me of Rob Calabrese just as a running backs coach. So I don't know exactly what he was doing here to bring a positive, spin on things, but Breece Hall is going to do Breece things regardless of Taylor's here or not. So I feel like no matter who it is, it's going to be an upgrade. I'm not quite sure what this Tennessee guy looks like, but anything with Keith Carter's approval on it makes me a little weary.
That's the thing with these assistant coaches, right? We just always assume if a position group is performing well, the coach must be good. If they're not, he must be bad, which that can be the case. But, sometimes you might have a situation where the player, so, Breece Hall is the guy leading that room. He's so good, it's not going to matter who it is. I don't think Breece Hall is going to be, no matter who his running backs coach is, he can do enough. He's going to be successful. And not to diminish what running backs do, but it's a lot of, if you know where you're supposed to go, it's take the ball and go. If the holes are there, hopefully you have the vision to see it and the ability to make the moves to hit the hole and make a play. But how many times in the league have we seen first year guys, rookies, or guys who sort of journeymen who just land in the right spot where the O-line is great and all of a sudden they're off and running and it's like, oh, where's this guy been all this time? It's like he's been in the league, but if your line is squared away, which I mean, and Jets fans, this is something Jets fans need to get past. I mean, well, listen, I don't say you need to get past. I mean, do what the hell you want. Talk about what you want to talk about. I'm not here to tell anybody how to fan. But if you're one of these people that can't talk about anything but the offensive line, go take a nap. Like, I get it. I know the offensive line sucks. I know they need serious upgrades there. I'm not going to spend the next 7 months talking about nothing but the offensive line. But you get these fans where you can be like, oh man, I hope they re-sign Morstead. Doesn't matter, they don't have an offensive line. Right, I get it, but I still would like them to have a punter. And Zerline's going to be a free agent. Doesn't matter if you can't block. Okay, but you still need a field. Like, there's other things. Just because there's a most important thing doesn't mean the other things don't matter, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about them. Like, this team needs a run-stuffing defensive tackle. They need better safeties. They need another pass catcher. All of these things can be talked about. And like I said, if you want to spend the next 7 months of your life talking about tackles, have at it. But the number of comments I see on, like, I'll tweet something completely unrelated, and the response is, whatever, man, we can't block. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the guys on the roster now might change between now and opening day. So let's wait till we know who's on the team before we talk about what the team can and can't do. It's great. And we see, it used to be the thing with now that it's like it's always got to be something. It's always been quarterback.
Yep.
But now that they got Aaron Rodgers, we have to find something else to treat as if it's the only thing that matters. Yes, the offensive line matters. Yes, it's important. Yes, we're going to be watching and reporting on offensive linemen from Mobile all week, and they'll probably be the biggest part of the conversation. But Jesus, people that can't stand to see another topic on Twitter or Facebook or the Jet Nation forums or on here, like, settle down. Like, there are other things to talk about. Anyway, one of those things to talk about, Dylan, you messaged me about it a little while ago. I saw it on the forums on Jet Nation probably a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. I forget what the topic was. Somebody had tweeted out, let's bring back Jamal Adams. And Jamal Adams, he of the I am too good for the Jets, he of the get me out of here, I'm too good for New York.
Lighting cigars when he gets traded.
Listen, side note, but Jamal Adams to me is the biggest. I've never seen someone who was such a badass on the football field and so sensitive and delicate off of it. It's like, what's the real guy? Like, on the football field, you're a murderer. Off the football field, Charmin. Going after reporters' wives for criticizing your play on the field. That's nuts. That's nuts. But anyway, because Jameer saw the headline. We're going to talk about it. Let's talk about the Jamal Adams stuff. So the Jamal Adams stuff is that Jamal Adams has been taking this. And remember, he was benched in Seattle, so kind of out of the job there. But Jamal Adams has been responding to, reacting to, liking social media posts in relation to him coming back to the Jets. How we doing, Wild Wave? So what are your thoughts here? Jamal Adams flirting with the Jets because he's out of the job in Seattle. Is he a guy you would have any interest in bringing back? Is it even realistic? Would Seattle be willing? I mean, I guess at this point, they've got so much egg on their face. They might, because now Carroll's gone. So Carroll didn't, the new regime didn't trade for him. So we'll see what happens there. But what are your thoughts on a Jamal Adams return to the Jets with him flirting with Gang Green on social media?
So the flirting on social media part, I mean, I don't try to put a ton of stock into it. It just happened to come across my Instagram timeline. It was a post backdated with the T. Higgins and Calvin Ridley graphic, and I saw that he liked it. I shared it to the group. So I thought that, like, I don't try to read too much into that part specifically. But when it comes to him rejoining the team, I mean, why not? If you get the Jamal Adams that was in New
not to
York,
cut you off, but what
no, you're
about him
fine.
liking a post that says maybe we should bring Jamal Adams back, and he
So
liked that?
yeah. So if he's an impending, well, he's not an impending free agent, is
No,
he?
he's got a
Yeah,
huge contract, but he's not playing
yeah. So
anymore.
if I don't know what his cap figures is. Maybe you can look it up while I'm talking, but I'm sure they'll probably end up trying to cut him or move on from him in some way. So, I mean, if he wants to be here, I think first and foremost, that's the question you have to ask. We want people. Tomlin said it. We want volunteers, not hostages. We don't want a guy who's going to come in here, just because we have Aaron Rodgers, and then if shit hits the fan next year again, we don't want somebody who's going to be crying and saying, "Oh, I want to get out of this losing organization. They're stuck in their ways, blah blah blah." We don't want to see that version of Jamal. Like you said, between the white lines, Jamal, when he was putting on the green and white, I always think back to the Danny Dimes strip sack touchdown. I mean, that
That was something
was
else.
an amazing play, but like everything else that comes with him is very hard to package together. You have to think the price point is going to be low if he's cut after receiving this large deal. Jameer in the chat says they are going to cut him. It
If
seems
he's
like
cut
so.
post June 1st cut, he's a $10 million cap hit with $16 million in savings.
Okay, so they have a decision to make, but if he was already benched, it feels like the decision's already been made. Yeah, I would say yes, but my first question is, are you going to be 100% about the team? Because I was really sick of oh, I didn't lose the
I
team.
mean, he won't. He'll give you
Yeah,
everything on game day, but the
right.
second things aren't going his way, what are you going to get?
Yeah, it makes it
This
very
is what
tough.
I mean on game day. Absolute maniac, game wrecker. Want that guy on my team. I don't want him in coverage, but I want that guy on my team. But then to the social media, so sensitive, so
Yeah.
tuned into what's everyone saying about me, and I'm gonna
Imagine his
pout
first
or
presser with
respond
Connor
or
Hughes standing right there.
what's that? Yeah, that was one of the things I thought is that'd be an awkward interview, right?
Oh, of course.
The first time the press pool meets with Jamal Adams and Connor Hughes is standing there.
Burning
Absolutely
bridges with the
nuts
New York
there.
media is the quickest way to find out that they're not going to write anything nice about you.
No,
So
well,
it would be tough. It would
and
be tough
that's
for
another
him
reason
to
they
come
couldn't
back.
bring him back.
Exactly. It would be very tough for him mentally, like you just said, everything, about, being soft off the field and taking everything to heart. Like that's going to be tenfold if he comes back to this organization based off his actions and things like, yeah, you don't come at somebody's wife and think that you can come back to the team and everything's going to be peaches. Joe in the chat says Adams is a major upgrade. I
Not
guess
in
it depends
coverage.
on
He's an
what
upgrade in the
person.
box, but I mean,
I was
and
going to
even
say
if
it
he's an
depends
upgrade
on
in
what
coverage, that's just
person
because
you're
the Jets
looking
can't
at.
cover safety.
To be honest, the biggest, and he's not even an upgrade, but the biggest replacement that he would be for somebody that this defense could lose is Bryce Huff. Like I think of him as an edge rusher. I don't look at him as a
I
coverage
said
guy.
years ago, before he even started logging the sacks, just watching that quick twitch first step explosiveness. I wrote an article saying the Jets have a pass rusher on their roster, they're just not using him, and it was about Jamal Adams. Joe says remaining 4 playoff teams have 15 drafted starters with at least 3 on a second contract. Jets have 8 and 1. That a couple things here. Joe Douglas really only has the one draft class where guys are up for new contracts, which would be this
Mhm.
year the Becton, which I don't know that he'll get one. I could see Ashton Davis coming back. I could see Bryce
Not
Hall
a
getting
starter, though.
as a backup piece somewhere in there. Interesting thing I was thinking about today with as I was looking at the Jets' previous drafts, Dylan. Um, and I don't know how you fix this if you're the Jets, because I've talked about how the biggest thing that's derailed Joe Douglas's drafts have been the injuries, right? Because the offensive line would be a damn good group if there were no injuries, and a better offensive line means better everything. QB's got more time, better for receivers, but everything is better when the O line is better. Um, but the other thing that crossed my mind today is I was looking at that 2021 class, and I thought kind of character really and injuries again are really a thing stopping that class. That could have been a monster class. Like,
Mhm.
I get it. Zach, fine. He's gone. We'll throw him out. But AVT, the injuries. Elijah Moore, the character. Had to get rid of him, not for talent reasons. He
No.
produced in Cleveland, and he will be a good NFL receiver. I think Michael Carter was let go because he was mad about the depth chart situation. He felt like he was the better back and he wasn't getting carries. We saw the
Yes.
video of him yelling at Embry, getting in his face on the sidelines. I think Michael Carter probably opened his mouth and said, "This is bull. We got guys who I'm better than getting carries ahead of me." Something along those lines. Because from a talent perspective, he's a 4.5 yard per carry guy since being drafted. Good player, not great. And then you've got Michael Carter, the DB in that draft class. You've got Jamie Sherwood, who's gotten better every single year, and I think could see even more playing time next year in that draft class. You've got Brandon Eccles, who's not great, but a solid depth piece. Like, if Elijah Moore had kept his nose clean, and if Michael Carter kind of, shut up and colored, took that approach of I'm not going to complain, and although an AVT didn't get hurt, that is a really good draft class. Instead, because we're the Jets, AVT gets hurt. Elijah Moore turns out to be ridiculously selfish. Michael Carter may be a little bit too impatient. I'm not going to say he's wrong. He was better than Dalvin Cook, but maybe he got a little bit too impatient. So a lot of these guys are hurt or getting shipped off for reasons unrelated to how talented they are on the football field. Like and then when you get into Becton and you get into well, of course, Tippmann, of course, he only missed a little bit of time this year. But when you start looking at the guys who have either not played because of injury or had to be let go because of character, and then the guys who have hung around and improved, Ashton Davis gotten better, Jamie Sherwood's gotten better. Like, there's some good stuff here, but it just they can't put it all together, and that makes me worry about next year. What does the future hold with Aaron Rodgers? Did you or did you not? Have you had the chance to watch Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh sit down for an interview with Eric Allen at the conclusion of the season?
No, I think I just
It
watched their individual pressers. I didn't watch the one
Yeah,
with
but
EA.
I think it came out yesterday or the day before. I
Okay.
just watched it yesterday. I was a little surprised, and let me know what you think of this. I'm not going to get super into detail. The thing that's I feel like they're in a spot, and this is kind of what Joe Douglas did at his presser. And I take it you mean Chuck Clark coming back, Nicholas. He's a free agent, but we'll see. I think they'd like to bring him back. Um, But I think Douglas kind of did this in his presser, but then with Eric Allen, he changed it up. And listen, it's content for the team website. They got to do the rah-rah cheerleader stuff. But it was again with the next year is going to be special and wait to
Mhm.
see, and it's going to be different. And this is what, and even as a guy who I always say, I understand, like, what else do you expect him to say? They've got to say these things. Well, I'm watching that and I'm thinking, just stop. Just
It's
stop
the
telling us
sales
what you're
pitch,
going to
yep.
do. Do it. And I get, like,
Yeah.
I get there's not a game tomorrow, so you can't prove it tomorrow. Fine. But just take the approach of, like, look, we have high hopes next year, but as we learned this year, we have no idea what's going to unfold, but we're going to do everything we can to prepare to have a good season. Don't sit down after what we just sat through and tell me next year is going to be special.
Yeah, I feel like if you keep telling people your plan, you're putting less effort into the actual plan itself. And I like you said, it's a long process. We have all off season, it's literally just starting. We're not out of January. Next week is like the start of the draft with Senior Bowl, but yeah, it does get a little tiring, and I know Joe Douglas's pressers should be taken with a grain of salt because the amount of actual, sentences worth talking about are very few and far between with him. But yeah, I'm tired of hearing the sales pitch season of, oh, next year's going to be the year. Everybody get excited because Woody wants us to sell more tickets next year, and it all goes
Exactly what
hand
I
in
was just gonna
hand.
say.
So
Like, there's the
yeah.
part of me that gives them a little bit of leeway because I understand, and I have to remind myself of this sometimes. Like, there are, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but there are a lot of fans who watch the team casually, and it's a
Mhm.
hobby, and they enjoy it, and they, they're fortunate enough, they've worked hard enough, they've got the money to buy season tickets. I don't begrudge anyone for that. Um, but I think that's who that content is for. Like, they're just feeding those people who just want to hear next year is going to be special, and they're like, okay, yeah, yeah, let's get fired up. But they're not looking at the big picture and like what could go wrong. And of course, anything could go wrong with any team. But as we say, uh, as I've said a few times, the Aaron Rodgers thing, the age is concerning. You've now got 2 consecutive years with an injury. He's not going to get any younger. Young, healthy quarterbacks rarely play a full season. Like, it's not a question of, is Aaron Rodgers going to miss time next year? It's a question
Mhm.
of how much time is he going to miss and when is he going to miss it? Is he going to miss 3 games, but is it the playoffs? Or is he going to miss, 2 games at the beginning of the season, a couple games in the middle? Like, we don't know that. But quarterbacks of this day and age rarely play every game. And I would imagine when you're 40, 41, coming off an Achilles, it's less likely you're going to play 17 games. I hope he does. I hope he does,
Right.
but whether or not he does, we'll see. But as far as, a second ago, I mentioned playoffs, and it reminded me, I wanted to talk about something I saw the other day. And it's weird we're going to talk about this because I kind of hate these conversations, but it's an interesting question to me. I hate the conversation of like, which team is less pathetic? Like, who was less bad, right?
Hmm.
Because the Jets are
Yeah.
always in those conversations. It's not like it's never how are the Jets the best. It's like, let's talk about a way that they're not the worst.
Right.
Um, but it was something I almost mentioned a few weeks ago, and I just didn't have it in me because I was, pissed off, and another year without the playoffs, and the Dolphins are going, and you just pray they lose in the first round, and they didn't let us down. They did. They choked away in the first round, and that's kind of their thing. So, we see these pathetic arguments on social media with Jets and Dolphins fans about who sucks more and whose team is less bad. Um, but what do you think is worse? And it's hard as we're Jets fans. We're going to want to err on the side of whatever's most favorable to them. But what would you rather? Would you rather 11, 12, 13 years of not being in the playoffs or 20, 21, 22 years without a win in the playoffs? Which is a more damning, indictment of your team? Like, you've not been to the
Uh,
playoffs, right? Because I saw really the Dolphins were my focus. I think because they do the most talking. Bills fans aren't as, yappy. Um, but the Bills and Dolphins have fewer playoff wins than the Jets over the last 20 years, even though the Jets haven't been to the playoffs in 13. And I'm
yep.
I'm like, what's worse? Which one is worse? I don't know what I don't want either one. I want them to win a damn Super Bowl so we can stop talking
Of
about
course.
dumb stuff like playoff droughts. But I'm like, which is more pathetic? Is it a 13-year playoff drought or a 2-decade playoff win drought?
So I think when you put it as what's the more damning indictment on the franchise, I think it's the 13-year playoff drought because you can't even get over the hump for that long. I mean, I don't want to speak for every Jets fan, but I'll speak for me personally. Wild card weekend sucks when your team's not playing. I mean, yes, the games were mostly blowouts, but
Yeah.
even if the Jets were getting their doors blown out, like you get one more week where there's only 8 teams playing. So for me, I think personally, I would rather make it to the playoffs and then lose in the playoffs. But no, I think the more damning indictment is definitely the playoff drought because a lot of teams make it that probably shouldn't make it to the playoffs, and Miami has been that team a couple times. I think they made it with like Matt Moore when their quarterback got hurt toward the end of the season, and
Yeah,
things
I
like
think you
that.
might be right about that. I forget. My memory's going, man. I'm getting old.
Yeah, yeah, I remember watching it from like a bar in Mexico, and like it was Matt Moore versus the Steelers, and they had their backup too, and it's like these teams make the playoffs
Who was
randomly.
the
Like
Steelers
again, the
quarterback? Was it Tommy Maddox?
no, this wasn't that long ago. This might have been like 2018, so like not too long
Was Moore
ago.
with the Dolphins that recently?
Yeah, I believe so. It was the number 8.
Oh,
Maybe it was
man, my
maybe it might
memory is
not have been
going,
more,
dude.
but
My memory is
definitely
going.
backups on both
Dolphins are from
sides.
Miami, right? Is that right? Am I correct
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that?
right.
Jesus, this is terrible.
Where it's
Don't
warm
get
right now,
old, man. My brain is
right?
shot.
Point being, I think regardless of the situation, you wanna at least make it over the hump of getting into the playoffs, so that's where I would lean, and either way, it's people who wanna compare the 2 situations as if the other is supposedly so much better than the others. No, we're all just sitting here wishing we were playing more, you know? So, like, at the end of the day, I hate going back and forth about who has it worse. I'd say the Jets do just because we know the day to day, but the Dolphins also just fired Vic Fangio, and it
That
wasn't
was going to be the
because
next thing I was going to ask if you heard about that. That's
yeah, it
crazy.
wasn't about his X's and O's, it was a
He was a
relationship
big
problem.
hire.
So and
Like
he's
he was
already
like
being
he was the
rumored
guy Miami got, and you were like, "Oh man, that's a pain." Like
yeah,
there's one of
a
the best guys in the league at what he does.
and now it's supposedly he's already going to Philly. So these rumors are spiraling out of control. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and laugh at the Dolphins because we're not in a position to laugh at the Dolphins, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows, even when you win 11 games and make it to the playoffs. So,
Yeah, that's crazy stuff. But Senior Bowl, let's talk Senior Bowl before we go here. Let's see. I pretty much have the accepted invites just permanently on my desktop scrolling around, but now they haven't split it up by roster yet on the
hmm
Senior Bowl page, the recent
yep,
Senior Bowl page. But we got some names. Some tweets came out from Jim Nagy and company, letting us know some national, some players for the national team, which is where Jeff Ulbrich will be coaching.
yep,
What are your thoughts? Who did you see that Ulbrich is going to have? What got you excited? Peyton Wilson today. I
yep.
tweeted that out. NC State linebacker, who I've been talking about on this show for a couple years now. I want to see him I want to see his 40 at the combine. I think he's going to run a faster 40 than anybody else out there. And if not, I bet he'd run the fastest 80 if they had that. But what are your thoughts on the guys that Ulbrich is going to have?
So just we can touch mainly on defense because it's Ulbricht's side of the ball. I'm looking at linebackers and edge groups, which will be coached by our linebacker coach Nathaniel Willingham. Names like Liatu Latu from UCLA, he's an intriguing one for me because a lot of
Mm,
people have him as a first round pick.
first
Not
rounder.
saying for the Jets,
Yeah.
but yeah,
If
he's
they
gonna be
take
first
him,
round. Yeah,
whew,
exactly. You mentioned it, Peyton Wilson, um, JD Bertrand from Notre Dame. I was just watching. Who was I watching? Brendan Rice versus Notre Dame, and he popped up to me a couple times. So, just a couple names. I don't think they announced the DBs yet for each side, but I'm excited about all the DBs. There's offensive linemen. We got the best offensive linemen by far. I think I tweeted that at you that our offensive line versus the American team defensive line on the game is going to be great. I mean, we got Fuaga, Ladarius Henderson, who I who we both like. Excuse me. Jordan Morgan is another one we both like. I understand everybody likes Titman at center. If you put him at guard this year, you could like somebody like Jackson Powers Johnson from
yep.
Oregon. So there's tons of names on the national team side that I'm excited for. Cooper Beebe is another one, and then Troy Fatnow. I mentioned him a couple weeks ago. I watched him in depth. I think I watched 2 or 3 games of him. I really like him. I mean, he's not a pick at 10, but if they drop back like you've suggested a couple times on the pod, if they drop back, get a couple extra picks, Fontenot might be a pick that, if they want to move AVT to tackle, you could pair up AVT and Fontenot next to each other, maybe left tackle, left guard, if they move on from Lakin, which I think they should do. So, yeah, I think we have a lot of good offensive linemen. I actually haven't looked at the quarterbacks. I know that's usually the hot one for the national team.
Is Joe Milton
Scrolling on
there?
their feed right now. We okay, so the national team, which is I'm just saying we because it's Ulbricht's team, has Sam Hartman, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix, which means the American team has Carter Bradley, Joe Milton, Michael Pratt, Chris Schubert's a favorite of Chris Schubert's, and Spencer Rattler. So I mean, I think we got the better of the quarterback group with Hartman, Nix, and Penix. But I'm also intrigued by Milton, Pratt, and Rattler. I think this quarterback group is really slept on compared to past years at the Senior Bowl.
And Bo Nix, I'll tell you what. I've talked about him. He's a guy that I feel like we've been watching for a decade in college. Um,
Yes.
but I didn't watch a ton of him this year, and I went a few weeks ago. I watched a couple of his starts. Looked like a completely different guy. I mean,
Yeah,
he
the
was so
Auburn
much
Bo Nix
better
is,
than the
yeah,
old version of.
completely
I
different.
was watching him. I'm like, this is because I've seen people say, "Oh, Bo Nix in the first round," and I'm like, he was okay. He put up some numbers, but I don't know. I'm not saying he was bad, but he didn't strike me as a first rounder prior to this season. but watching a few of his starts last week, I messaged Chris about this, and I can't remember if it was our group chat or if it was just Chris, but I was like, we may have actually talked about it pre-show one day. And I was like, Bo Nix, man, like he's the throws, he's the accuracy, the balls, on the move, play action, rolling out.
Mhm.
Just looks like a different guy. Looks like an absolute slam dunk first round pick. And I'm happy for him. He took a
So
lot of heat, even though he wasn't bad at Auburn, he took a lot of heat. Let's
yeah,
see, leave
my
Tippmann at
my
center.
question to you real quick, speaking about Knicks,
Yeah.
do you think there's a possibility Knicks or Penix? I know they're kind of the hot buzz names. McCarthy, McCarthy, not so much. But do you think either of those guys could sneak in before the Jets pick at 10? And we have four quarterbacks. You'd have Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, assuming, and then a Bo Nix or Michael Penix, because that would just push one more person down the board for the Jets. Do you think that's a possibility?
I mean, the way Penix played from the games I watched, I've seen worse quarterbacks than that taken in the top 10.
Yeah,
So
right.
I wouldn't rule it out. Only thing with Penix is that, well, the biggest thing with Penix is the injuries. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
when you're talking a quarterback a position that important that early in the draft, I say all the time, like the red flags. I try to avoid guys like the plague if they have significant injury history. I think in recent memory, the only guy that I would have that I would have given a pass, and it's because he was such an amazing player, and it would have bitten me in the ass because he was so injury ridden in the NFL was Malik Hooker. I mean, watching that guy at
Yeah,
Ohio
he was
State,
special.
I
His
mean, that
range.
dude
Oh,
was out of this world. And I'd watch him and I'd be, pre-draft, and I'm like, I know I always say you can't take an injury prone guy, but this dude is another level. And I would have rolled the dice and I would have lost because, like I said, he's been on a few teams with a lot of injuries. We either have the line but don't have the weapons, or have the weapons but not the line. I'll tell you what, man, it's so true. Juan, you look back even when the Jets were winning playoff games with Mark Sanchez. They eventually got him some pieces, but I don't know. Like to me, put Brees Hall behind that line. That Rex
oh yeah,
Ryan. I mean, Thomas Jones, who was a good player, but behind that line ran for what, 1,500 yards. Brees Hall go for
yeah.
2,000 yards behind that line, easy.
I was gonna say the what was the last game of the season in the snow versus New England? I think one of the commentators made a comment about him looking like Curtis Martin against the Steelers, and that's what you would expect from Brees Hall behind that offensive line for an entire season. Like it would
Yeah,
just be unfair.
yeah. Joe says from the guy he says Zach was undraftable. McCarthy's a 15-year NFL QB. McCarthy's a guy I'm hot and cold on. Like early on, I was like, I'm not so sure, but he's got the it factor, right? Like he just wins, and I know he's surrounded by a lot of talent, but
Yeah,
I was watching Michigan today again to watch Ladarius Henderson and Zach Zinter, some of those linemen, Nugent at center.
Zinter's good. I like him. Yep.
I love Zinter. If he
Hmm.
falls because of that injury, oh man, I would love. I mean, I loved him before I saw him crawling off the field to avoid a penalty. And that, did you see that when he got injured,
No, I have not seen
dude?
that.
When he
No.
got the final game of the year, he gets injured late in the game, like serious injury, like broken ankle, whatever it was something serious. He gets injured, and Michigan has no timeout, so they're going to get flagged if they have to stop the game. And he's like using one leg and both hands to run off the field to carry himself off. I was like,
Oh
that's
my
it.
goodness.
Draft that guy. Like, I already
Yeah.
loved him, but it was like back in the day when I was watching Donovan McNabb throw up between plays, running into the huddle. And that was a play at Syracuse when his linemen were carrying him between plays. He had messed
Yeah.
up his
Yeah.
ankle, and
That
I
happened
was
with
like, that
Byron
guy's awesome.
Leftwich too, right, at Marshall? Yeah, they carried Byron Leftwich down the field too.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe I think Leftwich was the one who got carried. McNabb was the one who was throwing up. But both of them
Yes,
in
yeah.
college, like Leftwich didn't pan out either. He was another one that I thought
Mhm.
was going to be really good. It didn't work
No,
out.
but that just screams that you're 210% for the team. So, yeah, Zinter,
Yeah, exactly.
sign me
That's
up
what I
for
mean.
that.
That's the stuff you want to see, man. And
Yeah,
Zinter, like I said, I would love that, but I'd love BB. In the late
yeah.
first, early second, middle second round, wherever he goes, he's a guy who can play guard and tackle. Um,
Back to Joe's point, though, I think McCarthy could be a 15-year NFL quarterback as a backup. I
you
don't
don't
see
think the
him as a
starter?
start. Maybe for the first, couple, maybe not for the first couple years, maybe down the road. I don't know if he's a 15-year starter. I don't know about that. That's tough.
Yeah, we'll
He's kind of
see,
like
man.
Bo
Jimmy
Nix
says
to me.
obviously
Like you've
Salah has his
seen,
hand in the defense. I wonder how much of the credit should actually go to Ulbrich. That's a good question, Jimmy. I think because I often say like when Rex was in town and they would give his coordinators credit, I always felt like Rex Rex is on the headset, and Rex would never say who was calling what. He actually went so far to say, I don't know if this was true, but I think it was a cool idea from Rex. He said that him and Dennis Thurman and Mike Pettin would take turns calling the plays so they wouldn't
Mhm.
become predictable. Which actually, again, I don't know if it's true, but that's pretty genius.
Yeah.
But in the case of Ulbrich and Saleh, I really think Saleh doesn't want to upset anyone and wouldn't want to offend Ulbrich by stepping on his toes and probably lets him call everything.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
I would say so too.
I'm sure he chimes in. Why wouldn't he? I'm sure if he sees something, he'll say like, "Hey, let's take a look at this, that, the other." But I would say Ulbrich probably makes the vast majority of the calls because Salah's just all about friendship and buddies and and keeping
Yeah.
everybody happy. And
Hey,
guys
hey,
don't like when they
they
get
kept
overruled.
they did keep the right coach happy. Aaron Whitecotton got his extension. Hallelujah. Because
Yeah.
if that
Oh,
guy
did
became a
that
DC for
happen?
somebody else, yeah, they
Let's see.
just like I think like 2 hours ago, Costello tweeted it out. So the fact that Aaron Whitecotton is back is huge. You need to retain his best edge rusher now in Bryce Huff. But yeah, I think a lot of the credit should go to Ulbrich, and I think this Senior Bowl opportunity is going to illuminate that more to the NFL world. I think people are really going to see the type of coach that he actually is. And for as much as people like to play for Saleh, they've spoken just as highly as Jeff Ulbrich, and he's a former player, so he comes from this same mold that all the guys do too. Like he understands what it's like. So I'm excited for him. I hope he doesn't leave. Obviously, it wouldn't be this year anyway. I mean, unless something unforeseen happens. But I don't know. I'm really excited for Ulbrich. I think the defensive assistants that we have in place make me feel comfortable to replace somebody like him. Like if they just wanted to elevate Aaron Whitecotton into the DC position when Ulbrich leaves, or however they wanted to do it. I know Manuel, our safeties coach, had an interview with the Jaguars last week
Yeah, I saw
for
that.
their defensive coordinator position. So it's not a matter of you look at the offensive coaching staff. Nobody's there to be a pipeline guy. I used to
The
think it was
coordinator isn't even a
Calabrese.
coordinator.
Exactly. I thought Calabrese would have been the guy under LaFleur if you gave him enough tutelage, but that's dead and gone. On the defensive side, you have guys, Tony Oden, Marquand Manuel, Aaron Wycott, these guys can even Rautenberg with the linebackers. Like these guys can step into a DC position if need be. So for as excited as I am with Ulbrich, I don't want him to leave because I think we're all going to see just how good of a coach he actually is.
Yeah, I'm happy he's going to get that opportunity. As far
Hmm.
as far as the Bryce Huff stuff goes, I don't know. I don't see how you keep him knowing that these big deals you're going to have coming down the pike in the next year or two. I've talked and who was it? I hate mentioning these guys because so much of what they say is like blowhardy just for clicks and all that.
Hmm.
But I actually agreed with him. I forget it was one of the WFAN guys earlier
Oh
today. I don't
gosh,
know who it was. It popped up because I'm not in the US anymore, so I don't listen to WFAN. Like
I'm
sometimes
in the
they'll say
U.S. and I
something
don't.
crazy enough that it'll pop up on my Twitter feed because somebody will retweet it.
Yep.
But this is actually something I was saying a few weeks ago, and I don't think Garrett Wilson is very happy here. And I think if the slightest thing goes wrong, he's gonna be like, after this season, he's gonna be like, I want a boatload of money or I want you to move me. So I think
Yeah.
he's probably of the big three of Sauce, Garrett, and JJ, and I'll keep this brief because I've said it a few times already. But of those three, I think Garrett is the least likely to look for a new deal after this year. But if things go badly, I think it's very likely he asks for a new deal or a trade. So you got to pay him $30 million to keep him. Sauce is the face of the franchise. His agent is not doing his job if after this season he doesn't say, we want our deal now. This kid is
Yes.
playing on a rookie deal. He is a by then possibly three-time All-Pro. He is doing things that nobody in the modern era in the NFL has done. So I'm not saying Sauce is greedy and Sauce is selfish. He's going to want a new deal. I'm saying his agent, as his agent acting on his behalf, had better
Yeah.
be asking for a new deal after this year. And then
Hmm.
Jermaine Johnson, very good player at a key position, older guy. The clock for him, that mental clock of like, how many big deals can I get and when can I get them? He started a couple years behind the eight ball. So he needs that first big deal ASAP because if he waits till that 5-year deal expires or that say the Jets exercise that 5 50-year option and then they tag him, By the time he gets halfway through the deal he eventually gets, he's on the downside of his career, and that's the last
Yep.
big deal he's getting, or he's never getting a bigger one. So he
Yep.
needs that deal ASAP. Like it or not, there is a route to all three of these guys wanting 25, 30 million a year after this season. And then you've got Huff. And do you want to keep Michael Carter? I know he's not a ton, but he's going to be
Yes.
8 million. He's not making anywhere near that now. That's a big jump. So
Yep.
And who are you going to sign this offseason? Aaron Rodgers' $66 million cap hit is only a couple years away. How many years down the road are you willing to push that? You willing to pay Aaron Rodgers for the next 11 years with dead cap hits? So I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying that based on the deals they have coming up and their lack of draft picks and they're in a good position in terms of edge rushers, I think Huff goes. But I know a lot of folks want him to stay around, but I don't know if they're real. Like Sauce, JJ, and Garrett is 90 million. Those are $30 million a year players. That's a lot of money. And they're $30 million a year players while Aaron Rodgers counts for 66 million. So that's 150 million a year cap space on 4 guys. And again, I know they'll move stuff around and they'll get creative, but that was one of the reasons I hated the Dalvin Cook deal. I felt like that was cap money that would have carried over. I think in a couple of years, $5-6 million is going to be a big deal because they're going to need to find a way to make all this work.
Yeah, I think from JJ's perspective, you draft Will McDonald and then you get rid of Bryce Huff. You have way more leverage now to say, I'm your best edge rusher, pay me money. Obviously, if they retain Bryce Huff, that makes it a little murky, and it dips into the money that you could spend on a Jermaine Johnson. But you traded up for him. You're going to want to pay him that extension, that whether it comes after year 3, 4, or 5, whatever they want to do. But all 3 guys are well worth an extension at this point. To your point about Garrett, real quick, I hope that Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, because if he goes down, Garrett Wilson will probably not want to stay here. I know it sounds like a little too extreme maybe, but that's kind of the world that we're living in. Yeah. Everything's teetering right now on that injury.
What if there's a Rodgers injury early and he's like, get me out of here before the deadline?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's the thing too. Yeah. If he gets hurt in camp, and I believe Rodgers suffered like 3 minor leg injuries just in camp. The one where he was stepped on, he limped away, then he had the calf tweak and this and that. So if anything substantial happens early enough, all hell could break loose with Garrett Wilson. Somebody put in the comments of Joe, if the Jets don't draft a quarterback, Garrett will leave. I don't know if that's necessarily true, because what is the drafted quarterback doing?
Yeah,
he would rather play with Aaron Rodgers.
On day 3, which is fine.
Yeah, and I think I would rather have Aaron Rodgers throw me a pass than even, maybe not Caleb Williams or Drake May, but like those are the only 2 guys in the class.
Honestly, right now, none of them are going to come in and be Aaron Rodgers. So
exactly. So Garrett Wilson would probably prefer an offensive lineman or a second wide receiver to take some pressure off of him, even a Brock Bowers to take some pressure off of him. So no, I don't agree with that take, but I do agree that Garrett would probably be the first to leave. Sauce, you're locking up. You're locking him up better than he locks up wide receivers.
He's not going anywhere.
Yeah. No, you can't.
Charles says Sauce is the face of the franchise. Tag, package, and that's what I've been saying with Huff. Tag and trade. Use him as bait to move back into the first round. I think with Huff, you're probably getting a second, unless maybe you add a pick. Maybe you get a first, but I think you're probably looking at a second there. Joe, I'm drafting a QB and cutting AR. You're looking at about a $90 million cap hit, and then you have to release everyone else on the roster. So Aaron Rodgers isn't getting let go with a $90 million cap hit.
No.
And we have Reed, MC2, and Eccles on a 1-year deal. Do you see any of them getting moved? I think if they do, I don't think it'll be pre-draft, or it'll be as the draft approaches, if they feel like there's a replacement there that they can get.
I could see them drafting like a late day coming in and being a replacement for Eccles if they wanted to move on from Eccles, but I think they like Eccles a lot. I feel like he stayed on as the cornerback.
He's done a nice job.
And they brought in a guy like Guidry last year in training camp, who I thought was going to make it over a Bryce Hall. So I think Brandon Eccles should all 3 of them, in my opinion, have to stay, at least for the duration of the run. You don't build all this up for Aaron Rodgers 4 plays in, he blows his Achilles, and then you tear it all down the next offseason before he
Yeah.
gets a chance. That's just my opinion, but I don't
Yeah,
know.
as
It's
far as
so tough
trading
'cause
Reed, we talked about that last week because I'd said last offseason
mhm.
that I would have liked to have traded Reed and drafted um, Pittsburgh cornerback Joey
Yeah,
Porter
yeah.
Jr.
Joey Porter. Yep.
Yeah, I thought trade Reed for a 3, get Porter Jr., pair him with Sauce, 2 young, cheap, elite corners. Didn't happen this year. I don't know if they can do that because now trading Reed, you can't use another one on a corner. You're not going to upgrade there. So I don't see how that's
Right.
possible. I could
You're not
see
getting
my
better than DJ Reed right now at this point with
right.
the assets that you have and the available and pending free agents, and even the cornerback group, yes, at the top is really nice, but you'd have to take somebody at 10 probably to get the quality of DJ Reed. You're not gonna wait till the 3rd round and find a DJ Reed caliber player.
Yeah, and Joe says, is Garrett Wilson going to want to stay after Roger? Garrett Wilson, the problem, what Garrett Wilson is fed up with is losing. Like if Aaron Rodgers plays and they win a playoff game next year and then he's coming back the following season, Garrett Wilson's going to be
There's hope.
fine.
Yep.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson's just tired of losing. So you don't need a quarterback. You don't need to draft one this year to have one ready to go next year. Again, draft one late by all means. Take Sam Hartman. And I think Charles says Joe Hamilton. I think you might mean Joe Milton because that's the other name I was just going to say. Draft a Joe Milton. Draft a Sam Hartman. Draft a guy on day 3 who you can develop. I like both those guys. 14 million, 25 million, 35 million in 26 that can be spread out.
And I mentioned his name
Um,
earlier on the list of quarterbacks at Mobile. If you wanted to even bring in a Spencer Rattler in like the 4th or 5th round,
I
depending
think he
on where
might climb some boards.
I think he will too, because it all depends on his interviews, and that's the stuff that we don't have the access to. Obviously, you and I can interview him on the field after practice if we get a hold of him, but it's not. I think what he needs to do is really tell the NFL people, the personnel in those meetings, that he has moved on from everything you've seen in quarterback one and everything at Oklahoma, even all the red flags about his character. And I think he turned the corner at South Carolina to really prove himself. Obviously, his play was a result of that maturity too. So if he just continues to continue maturing, basically, I think he could sneak into a top 100 pick. And like Chris said on the show last week, if you're at Mobile, the chances of you being a top 150 pick are just skyrocketed. Us being there, Glenn, like we're on the UDFA radar already. So
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a great opportunity to do some player interviews.
mhm.
Um, especially a lot of these guys we've been talking about for a while now. Tommy Eichenberg, I'm hoping to get him. Peyton
Yep.
Wilson, of course. Just a lot of these guys should be a good time. The 14-20 are you talking about Aaron Rodgers' salaries there? Is that what you're talking about there? Because
I
Rodgers,
think
I'm
that's
looking
if they
at.
cut Rodgers. That's the figures. If they cut Rodgers, it would be 14 in 2025 and 35 million in 2026. I'm assuming he means dead cap, but he's not getting cut
Yeah,
unless
it's
he literally says cut
66
me.
million in dead cap in
Yeah,
2024 if
he'd have to
according to
say
over the
cut me
cap.
for them to cut him, in my opinion.
Yeah, and yeah, they're not gonna take on a $66 million dead cap hit, 49 million next year, 35 million the following year. Um, yeah, and they're not. He's the reason they're selling season tickets. So that's
Yeah,
another reason why
exactly.
he's not going anywhere.
We all saw what the September 11th game looked like. I understand that it didn't end it
Yeah.
didn't. I mean, it ended the way we thought with a win, but it didn't go the way we thought. And that stadium was as loud as the accounts of fans that were there that said how loud it was compared to like past playoff games is just it's just ridiculous. And that's what they're trying to recapture in 2024. Oh, what's up,
Yep.
Dom?
Dom C's hopped
Just a
in,
couple
couple
days.
days. Let's go,
Yeah,
dude. I
all gonna
haven't
be
been to
there.
America in a long time. It's been
That's
like
crazy.
5 years for me, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
even when I was in the military, I'd come home once or twice a year, and but because of COVID and all the craziness, been
right.
a long time. I rarely had a difficult time remembering which side of the road to drive on. That's gonna be a little bit tricky, you know.
As long as I'm not in the car when you have
And I
those
try to make
issues, I'm
I try to
good.
make a point of like going to the airport and waiting for someone to leave so I can follow somebody out to remember which side of the road to be on. I'm landing at like midnight. Like I might be driving
Oh,
out there on my own, man.
you're gonna be just like wiping your eyes, like, left, right, which side of the road?
It's yeah. I'm not too pumped about that. and it's
Yeah. It's gonna be fun though. We're definitely gonna bring you guys tons of content. Hopefully a live show. Hopefully every day after practice, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. At least give you our thoughts. We're gonna keep uploading all the player interviews. We'll have them pumping on our social medias. Um, yes, it's gonna be exciting. And like Dom said, just a couple of days, we're all gonna be there. You and I, first time meeting, gonna be real exciting. We've been doing this show for 4 years, so it's gonna be exciting. And
has it been that
just
long? Genius.
yeah, dude, 2019 started writing for the site. Started
Wow.
doing the pod maybe 3 years ago, but still, we've been looking at each other's faces virtually for over 2.5
Yeah,
years
you
now.
poor
So
bastard.
it's time. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well,
excited.
we'll wrap this one up. We're just under an hour. Senior Bowl in a couple days. Excited about that. Jamal Adams liking Jets related return tweets. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they want to start over. Duce Staley says no, thank you, Jets. I will go to the Cleveland Browns and stay there. Jets got to find themselves a running backs coach. But bigger fish to fry, bigger things to worry about. Plenty of content coming Senior Bowl week. Myself and Dylan. Have a good one, Jets fans.